Thanks, Lucas. Thanks, Pat. What a wonderful session. I hope you all enjoyed that. So, good afternoon, one and all, to this afternoon session. It is my pleasure and privilege to be introducing some more content. So, we're going to be covering all the common errors and how to write a personal statement that stands out from the crowd. So, we're fortunate enough that this session is going to be delivered by Oliver Rutherford, who is the CEO and co-founder at Unirise, who are on a mission to help students from all backgrounds get into their dream university. Ollie's previously read at the University College London, the University of California, Berkeley, and is currently also a guest lecturer at UCL. Ollie, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. Well, without further ado, the floor is yours. We'll get the slides uploaded and we look forward to all your words of wisdom.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Ralph. Really excited to chat with you all today. And for the next hour, we're going to be going through all the secrets of the personal statement. Unfortunately, there is sometimes a mismatch between what admissions officers or admissions tutors, these are the people who are basically reviewing your personal statement, what they're looking for and what students are actually writing their personal statement. And it's not students' fault, it's not teachers' fault. There's just a lot of misinformation online on lots of random forums saying you should do this and you shouldn't do that. And I'm here as someone who's now reviewed over 20,000 personal statements in the last 3 or 4 years to kind of give you some real true information about what admissions officers on the whole are looking for and are not looking for. And in order to do that, I gave about 30 admissions tutors from Oxford, Cambridge, Nottingham, Durham, LSE, a bunch of universities. I gave them about 300 statements and I said to them, can you review these statements and give us your feedback? And then based on that, we built a course that you can use. It's free online at unirise.co.uk that goes through every part of the personal statement, what a good statement looks like, what a bad one looks like, what are some common mistakes, and what are some really small things that you can do that seem small, but will take your statement from good to outstanding so that you can really stand out from the crowd. During this presentation, feel free to ask any questions. And in the meantime, I'm just going to jump straight into it and share my screen. So, the first thing about the personal statement is the structure. And most people get this wrong. So I'm going to show you 3 different examples of 3 different structures of a personal statement. The first structure has a large introduction, some extracurriculars in the middle, and then 2 topic paragraphs. When I say topic paragraph, by the way, I mean a paragraph that is about the academic subject that you're applying for and why you're interested in that subject. The second one has an introduction, has 2 topic paragraphs, a paragraph and extracurriculars, and then a conclusion. And the final one has an introduction, 3 topic paragraphs, and then the extracurriculars and the conclusion are kind of joined together at the end. When I say extracurriculars, by the way, I'm referring to things you do outside your studies. So it might be sports that you do or music that you do or volunteering to show that you're kind of a more rounded human being. So I gave these 3 structures to 35 admissions officers from a bunch of UK universities. And I said to them, which one do you think is best and which one do you think is worst? And 100% of them agreed on which is best and which is worst. So what I'd like you to do right now is take about 20 seconds to have a think. And then in I believe the Q&A or the chat, Raf, you'll have to point me to which one. Let us know just with a number 1, a number 2, or a number 3, which you think is best and why. So for example, you might say number 1 is best because it's got a big introduction, which is really appealing to read from the perspective of a university. I'm going to give you 20 seconds to write number 1, 2, or 3 and why you think that's the best structure. Off you go. We've got Sarah saying that number 2 is the best. And thanks for giving a reason as well, Sarah. You're saying that it's got the best balance of content. Nice. Dollar Academy agrees with number 2. I'm curious to hear why Dollar Academy as well. And Sarah, if you can explain what you mean by balance of content, I'd love to hear that too. I'll give you about 10 more seconds. So I'm looking for a couple more answers. We've got Milika, who thinks that 1 is the best because it shows the most subject-specific understanding and also talks about extracurriculars. And then Joshua thinks that 2 is the best because it gives sufficient space about subjects, yourself, and your interests. And Sarah, thank you for elaborating. You're saying it puts emphasis on our knowledge, but also allows for our personal interests outside of academics. Interesting. So we generally, Milika, you've changed your mind. You've said 3. Interesting. So we generally think that 2 is the best. Someone thinks 1 is the best and someone else thinks 3 is the best. Milika, I'm so glad you changed your mind because the answer is that the best structure by far is structure 3. Unfortunately, what a lot of students do is structure 2, and then some students sometimes do structure 1. The reason why number 3 is the best is the following. Firstly, your introduction should be short. It's not the end of the world if it's long, if it's a great introduction, but it needs to be concise and to the point. The more you focus on your topic paragraphs where you're reflecting on why you're interested in your subject and the things that you've read or the videos that you've watched or the work experience that you've done and why that's made you more passionate about your subject and what you've learned from it, the better. And the reason why 3 is better than 2 is because for 2, you have a whole paragraph on extracurriculars, and then at the end, you do another topic paragraph. But actually, whilst extracurriculars are important to show that you're a human being and that you have skills like leadership and patience and communication, universities on the whole care a lot more about the fact that you are interested in your subject than the fact that you might have grade 7 on the piano or something like that. If you have a grade 7 on the piano, great. You might want to mention that. You might want to share why, that demonstrates that you have perseverance and determination and time management skills, which is crucial for a degree in, medicine at university. But ultimately, and this is what someone from Cambridge said to me several months ago, they would much rather a student going for history who's very good at history and very passionate about history, who doesn't play the piano, than someone who's good at history and does play the piano. So the key conclusion here is keep the introduction short. The vast majority, about 80 to 90% of your statement should be these topic paragraphs, which are very specific about your academic interests related to your subject. And at the end, you can do your extracurriculars, and then your last sentence might be an inspiring sentence about why you're excited to study this subject at university. Any questions, again, let me know in the chat. But like I said, most students go with structure 1 or 2 is an easy way to have your personal statement projected. Moving on. What I'm going to do now is show you 3 different types of introductions. These are all real introductions from real students. 2 of them students that sent their introductions to Unirise, and one of them a study that I'll show you later. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to read through these introductions, and don't worry about reading every word. Just give this a skim. So I'll give you 30 seconds to skim this, and then I'm going to show you 2 more, and I'm going to ask you to think about which one you think is best and why. So 30 seconds from now. This is a student applying for management at university, by the way. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one in 3, 2, 1. Now we've moved on to a student who's applying for law at university. Again, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds. And 3, 2, 1. And the final introduction is a student who's applied to study economics at university, which you could probably tell from the first word. Again, I'll give you 30 seconds. Someone's saying there's a problem with the screen share. Raf, can you see the screen okay? Or can others see the screen all right?
Oh. Hi, Ollie. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me all right?
I believe there might be some slight challenge with the screen share. It might be worth, if you want us to give us a little bit of a read through that might be useful?
Oh, is it that you can't see my screen?
Oh, it's just cleared up, Ollie. It's just cleared up. So they should be able to read it now. So you might want to reset the timer.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll start from 30 seconds again. Thanks for letting us know. I appreciate that, Dollar Academy. If it happens again, Raf, just let me know and I'll read it out.
Perfect. Will do.
All right. I'm going to give you 10 seconds. Don't worry if you don't read the whole thing. 3, 2, 1, and let's go. So in the chat, you have 30 seconds to tell me which one you think is best and why. Do you think number 1 is best, student applying for management at university, and why? Do you think number 2 is best, just like Huang just mentioned, student applying for law at university, and why? Do you think number 3 is best, student applying for economics at university, and why? If you're not sure which one's best, tell me which one you think is worse. 30 seconds, off you go. We've got Huang thinking that it's number 2. We've got Joshua thinking that it's number 2 as well. And Dollar Academy is letting me know that there's a problem with the screen share again, which for the next round...
It's cleared up again, Ollie. It's a strange one. It kind of comes in and out.
Okay, maybe just give it 5 seconds, Dollar Academy, and then hopefully it'll be okay. And then, okay, so we've kind of got a battle now. About half the people think that 1 is best. And half the people think that number 2 is best. And then Min thinks that number 3 is best because it's straightforward and easy to understand. Does anyone have really strong opinions? I'd love to see in the chat, like, which one are you confident is the best? Like, you're really, really sure that this one would get you into your dream university. Okay, well, whilst you're typing, I'm going to tell you the answer. Again, we asked about 35. Okay, Yao is very convinced that number 1 is 100% the best. And Sarah is very convinced that number 2 is the best because it shows personal interest and passion about the subject. And Ade Dotton is also very convinced that number 1 is the best. Okay, it's 50-50, guys, or like 48-48, and then 4% number 3. I mean, I'm making the numbers up, but bear with me. So the real answer is that the worst is a joint worst. Number 2 and number 3 were both considered basically terrible from admissions officers. And that's surprising because a lot of people actually think that number 2 is really good, as we can see over here. And when I've asked admissions officers this, they all agree that number 1 is the best by far. They don't think it's perfect. They give it like a 7.5 to 8 out of 10, but they give number 2 and number 3 like a 2 to 4 out of 10. Which really is surprising because when I ask students this, about 80% of students think that number 2 is the best, and about 75% of teachers think that number 2 is the best. So let's really dig into this. And I'm going to take a moment to jump in here. If my screen isn't sharing properly, I'm just going to read certain parts out. So why is number 1 really good? So in an introduction, the best way to do it is you start with a particular experience or thing that introduced you to your topic, to your subject. So this student over here, she did this work experience. And now she describes it a bit. She says, each section of the bank was divided into different departments, blah, blah, blah. Okay, she's described a bit. Description generally isn't a good idea. And my feedback here, I'm pretty brutal, by the way, would say that this could be cut in half, this description, but not the end of the world, not a deal breaker. But now look what she does. Okay, I did this work experience. This is what happened. In order to better understand how companies like this one are run, I read this book about Amazon and I learned how Jeff Bezos empowers his employees to think up and disagree and speak up if they disagree. So what this student did here in like the personal statement language is called bridging. They start with a kind of stimulus and then they reflect on, oh, actually, that was really cool. I wanted to understand it better, so I read this book. And not just I read this book and I learned this from this book. The truth is, guys and girls, that a lot of students lie in their personal statement. And from our perspective, it's really easy to see when students are lying because they mention things, but they don't expand on them and they don't reflect on them. They say, oh, I read this book by so-and-so and it was great. But actually, if you say, I read this book and I learned this from the book, and actually it challenged my opinion on this because before I believed that, but now this book has changed my mind. You've convinced us that you've actually read the book. So never just name drop things, actually reflect on them. And then what the student does in the end, which is also fantastic, is they say, okay, this management, blah, 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 it scaled Amazon to the biggest retail site and it's showing me the importance of management in the real world. So we recommend students to have a 3-step introduction. And again, on our website, it's all for free. You can go on and we kind of demonstrate this all for you, and you can download a document and it kind of holds your hand through the process. You start with what actually got you interested in your subject. It could have been a conversation with your mom. It could have been a work experience. It could have been a blog that you read. You reflect on that and you show that you've really engaged with it in some way. Like this student over here, they did a work experience. They read this book. They reflect on the book. And then at the end, you link it to why you want to study management or whatever subject you want to study. That's what makes it a good personal statement. Why is number 2 so bad? So let's start with number 3, because that's easy. Number 3 is really bad for a couple of reasons. A lot of students do this. About 15% of students define the subject. Economics is the study of how to allocate resources amongst, and this is offensive to me, someone who teaches economics at university. I know what economics is. And to be quite frank with you, I don't need like a 17 or 18-year-old, student in year 12 or 13 telling me what economics is, because I know what it is. And you could probably just look at that on Wikipedia. So don't waste space. You've only got 4,000 characters. It's about 400 to 650 words. Don't waste space telling me what economics is, or telling me the different parts of economics, from firms to households to microeconomics to macroeconomics. I know all of this stuff. It looks like you've gone into like the contents page of a book and you just picked random words. This student has not told me why they got interested in economics. They've not shown me at all that they've reflected on economics in any interesting way. And they're basically, it's so impersonal, I already don't want to read the rest of this personal statement. And remember, admissions officers are reading thousands of personal statements, and a lot of them are really boring. And they're like, I've been passionate about geography ever since I've been born. And they've read it so many times, you really need to capture their attention at the start. So definitions, explaining what the subject is, that I literally don't even want to read this to you right now because it triggers me. So really, really important thing to bear in mind. Let's look at number 2. This one over here, why it's really bad. Well, if you don't believe me, this one is actually from a study that I'm going to show you here. This is a study by the Sutton Trust, which is a really fantastic educational nonprofit that works on social mobility. And they actually took that introduction, which I will zoom into now. So it's the same one that I just saw, that I just showed you. Bear with me to just zoom in. Raf, is the screen okay?
We are all going well, Ollie. It's all looking good. It's a little bit, you're zoomed into the point I think you're going to talk about. So we're in luck.
Yeah, great. So this is the exact same one as you saw before. Captivated by the all-encompassing importance of law. I'm amazed at the way that the crime is moderated and precedents are set and how blah, blah, blah. Here's what the teacher said. And this is actually what a lot of teachers thought about this, that this introduction shows a clear enthusiasm for law and links this to understanding of its role in society. They said it would increase the likelihood of a student actually being offered a place. Here's what the admissions officer thought, the person actually reviewing the statement. And again, when I asked admissions officers, every single one of them agreed. This is an empty opening statement with no examples cited to back it up. The weak attempt to define law wastes space and provides no useful details about the applicant. It would slightly decrease the likelihood that this applicant would be offered a place. And the thing with this is that this is the kind of stuff that when I was a student, for example, I was told to write something like this, write something that's really fancy and use lots of big words to impress the admissions officer, to show off your amazing vocabulary and talk about the significant battle between upholding the morality of humanity while maintaining this. This sounds like a politician speak to try and get elected. But again, the student is actually not really saying anything here if you look at it in more detail. And admissions officers are really good at differentiating the nuance between a statement where someone actually is interested, whether they use big words or small words, it doesn't matter, and someone who's just writing pompous waffle to sound intelligent. They're actually not, here's basically they're trying to define law in a way that's not very good. My enthusiasm for law, they're not saying what actually interests them about law. It's the battle between upholding the morality, okay, fine, I mean, I'm not sure it is, but whatever, all with the aspiration of preserving a system. It's just not personal. I don't believe this student actually wants to study law. I think maybe they're just doing law because they think it might look good. And I don't want this student to study at my university doing law. So again, it's not personal. It's nothing like the first one, which is like, hey, I did this internship. And then I got really curious and I read this book, and the book was really cool because I learned this from the book. And then I was like, hey, management would be really cool. Now, what I just said, do not write. That's way too impersonal. That's like the opposite side of the spectrum. But this is the opposite of what I just said. So, summaries on introductions. What makes a good introduction? Use a specific example, a believable story about something that got you interested in the subject. If you want to do computer science, maybe when you were 11, your dad or mom showed you your first computer and you were like, whoa, like this is really cool. And that's what sparked your interest. And then you built a computer yourself, or you read a blog about it, or you listened to a talk about it, and then et cetera, et cetera. Evidence of doing research, actually engaging with the thing that you read or did or watched, and then at the end explaining why you want to do that subject. What we don't want are quotes. It's not the end of the world if you have a quote, but a lot of people quote, Martin Luther King and Gandhi and Mother Teresa, and it's just super cringy because we've seen it like a million times. And whilst you might think that you're using a quote that's very powerful, and it might be, like imagine reading the same quote about 1,000 times in the space of 3 weeks. Like you just wouldn't enjoy that. Definitions or descriptions, don't waste your time doing it, and don't do any of this vague generic waffle that we saw in that law personal statement, because it really wasn't high quality. Okay, any questions on the introduction before we move on to the topic paragraphs? I'm not going to wait because we've got less than 40 minutes. I'm going to move on to the topic paragraphs, and then in the chat, if you have questions, I can tackle them in a couple of minutes. So this is a bit of a beast. Again, I'm going to show you 3 topic paragraphs of 3 different students applying for 3 different subjects. And again, just like last time, I asked 30 admissions officers, here are 3 topic paragraphs. Which one is most likely to get into university? Which one is least, and why? Again, either 100% or almost 100% agreed which was the best and which was the worst. So we're going to take a moment to read this one. I'm not going to read this out loud because there are too many words here that I don't understand, and I'll just look completely.
Good news, Ollie. The screen's working perfectly. So we've timed that almost like we planned it.
I can't pronounce beta-lactam ring structure anyway, so it works for the best. So I'm going to give you now 1 minute to read through this one. The other ones aren't quite as long, so don't worry. And then I'm going to switch over to the second, switch over to the third. And then in the chat, whenever you're ready, let me know which is the best for you and why. Or if you're not sure, which one's worst and why. Off you go. That's 1 minute on the clock.
Ollie, we've got a couple of questions in about the introduction. What we'll do is, I think if we save them just for after topic paragraphs and do a joint bit of Q&A after intro and topics, if that makes sense for you.
Perfect.
Wonderful.
30 seconds left, guys. This is a pretty intense one with lots of subject-specific stuff, so don't worry about every single word. Ten seconds left. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. On to the next one. Student applying for physics at university. 30 seconds, have a read, take some notes. Remember, you're comparing this to the first one. All of these are real personal statements of students who have used UniRise. This is before they've given it to us, and our subject experts have torn it apart and made them much better. 3, 2, 1. And the third one is a student applying for geography at university. Give that a read. Another 30 seconds. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. I'm going to give you 43 seconds. And I'm just going to put this on my little timer to write in the chat which one you think is best and why, and which one you think is worse and why. So Josh thinks 3 for sure, because it limits waffle and gives reason behind the thinking process. Nice. Sarah thinks 1 is the best because it's got lots of subject-specific knowledge and relates to books. Avniel agrees. Min thinks 2. Oh no, Ming thinks 2 is not as good as 3. Nice. I'll give you about, hold on, how long do we have? We've got 21 seconds left. I'm looking to hear a couple more people's thoughts. Five seconds. Okay, that is my alarm. Okay, now I know that I have to turn it off. 1 second. Here we go. Great. Okay, so we've got, we have, Raf, it seems like we have a lot of disagreement here, don't we? We've got some people thinking 3 is the best and that 2 is the worst. We've got a lot of people thinking that 2 is the best and 3 is the worst. And we've got a lot of people thinking that 1 is the best and that the others are the worst, which is a nice mix, which is basically, and the point here, guys, like, it's totally fine if you don't know this, because it's not something that's often shared. And the whole point of why we're doing this workshop is to tackle the misconceptions about what a good personal statement is, because there is a lot of stuff out there that is just completely not factual. The true answer is that the one that is the best by far is number 1, followed by number 3, which is like decent but not very good, followed by number 2, which is atrociously bad. So that is, and Avniel just wrote that 2 is a shopping list. I love that. And it's also good. It seems that more people now understand that 1 is best for reasons that I explained in the introduction. You're using the same logic and you're applying that to the topic paragraph. So I'm already seeing progress in how you understand what the difference between an outstanding personal statement, a good personal statement, and a bad personal statement looks like. Okay, let's go through number 2 first. Just like you said, Avniel and others, it's name dropping. It's like, you know, when you go to a party, you meet someone and they're just like showing off how many people they know. And I met so-and-so. And I'm like, you're like, I don't really want to be this person's friend, because they're kind of just naming a lot of people. That's the exact same vibe here. I listened to this podcast and I went to this talk and I read these 3 things. And then I read this book, and then I read this book, and then I watched all these TED Talks, and then I read this book. And what I'm noticing is that you're not reflecting at all on any of these resources. You're saying you read that, and you're saying you read that. I could also say that I read like Karl Marx's Capital. I haven't. It's really long and I just haven't made the time to read it. But if I say it, I'm not proving that I read it. I'm only proving that I read it if I reflect on it and said, well, I read this book and I was really curious about how the fact that she defined this, because that made me more interested in this, and then blah, 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 blah. This person is just name dropping like nobody else. They've also got a grammatical mistake here, which is a big red flag. We'll get to that later. And at the very end, in a very cheap way, they say, all of these resources compounded my passion for physics and challenged me to think differently about the nature of the physical world. So let me tell you this, guys. Even though I'm telling you what I'm telling you, most of you are going to make this mistake. You're going to name drop. You're not going to critically reflect on the resources that you have. You're going to use the word passion or passionate, which is a big no-no. Don't tell me that you're passionate. Show me that you're passionate. In the same way, someone can say that they love you, but why believe them unless they show you that they love you? And this student said, challenge me to think differently about the nature of the world. That's so cheap because, like, in what way did it challenge you to think differently about the nature of the world? If you read, 7 brief lessons on physics and reality, which lesson in particular about, the black hole challenged you to think differently about the world? If you actually focus on one resource or 2, rather than naming 7, and then reflect on it in detail and share your journey about what it taught you and how it changed your mind and whether you agree or disagree and why, so much more powerful than the name dropping. Number 3 is okay. They're not name dropping. They're saying, I read this book this is actually, not a book, a work, to gain more understanding about the difference between, say, space and place. Okay, so at least you know what it's about. I then read this book, which explained how international aid is often ineffective, and often by giving aid to low-income countries, you're actually perpetuating their poverty. Okay, that's better than the last one. You're just pretending that you've read the books. At least you know what the book is about. But what you haven't done is critically engage with the book. I don't want you to tell me what the book is about. I know that you can go on Amazon or Goodreads. I've done this in the past where, I haven't read a book and I want to look at a summary so I can pretend I've read about a book, not in a personal statement, but just in life. Like, we're human beings. Sometimes we take shortcuts, but in a personal statement, you have to go in detail. You might want to say, Dan Bisamolo wrote this book about debt aid, saying how aid can perpetuate poverty. I found this analysis really compelling. However, compared to what I read from Easterlin, who disagrees, I learned that her analysis is flawed because it doesn't take into account all of these other countries, or the data set that she uses is not a representative sample size, or something else, but you need to actually engage with it. And at the end, the student says, I believe the only way to end wealth inequality is through this type of taxation. Be very careful about making bold statements like you have the solutions to the problems. The truth is that you don't, and the problems are really complicated. And 17-year-old Chris, who's doing geography A-level, isn't going to have the solution to end wealth inequality, despite you thinking that you might. So again, it's a bit patronizing for a professor who's been spending 40 years working on this problem to be told by someone who's only lived for a couple thousand days that they've got the solution to the problem. Does that make sense? Any questions? Just pop them in the chat. Let's look at number 1. Number 1 is actually a student who we helped and ended up going to Cambridge for biology. What makes this so good? All right, I'm going to break it down into a little bit more detail, and I'm also just going to check the chat to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, so firstly, they start with a work experience. Now, don't worry if you don't have work experience. We've been told by our universities that because of COVID in particular, you don't have to have work experience. It's a bit different for medicine and dentistry and physiotherapy and things, but generally speaking, it could be a book, an article, a blog, a TED Talk, a podcast, a conversation, anything. They did work experience in a hospital. Now, they're going into specific detail. Rather than, I had a great time at a hospital and it made me love biology, which is very vague and awful. One interesting particular case was a student suffering from tuberculosis. The doctor prescribed antibiotics. Okay, that's description. That's a good amount of description. It's very specific. Fine. I don't want her to go on more and more, but that's enough. Here's the bridging that we mentioned in the introduction. I wondered why there was a need to use multiple types, and if this was specific to the patient. So now you can see the student is really kind of nerding out about biology. She was like, he's used antibiotics, or she's used antibiotics. And I wonder if that's actually the best way to do it. It interests me how some strains of TB become resistant because of so-and-so. An interesting point in Marin McKenna's TED Talk was that the gene NDM creates, okay, now I'm getting lost. And actually, when I read personal statements and I get lost, unless it's a subject that I understand well or teach, it's generally a good thing, because when she's talking about beta-lactam ring structure and NDMs and genetically modifying hematopoietic stem cells, it means that they're really getting into the nitty-gritty about their subject, which means they're probably reflecting on their subject in a way that a non-subject expert would not understand. And that's why at UniRise, if you want our team to have your statement reviewed, we have someone from Oxford or Cambridge who is doing the subject that you're applying for to give you feedback. Because if I were to give this feedback, maybe the student is wrong and it's actually not beta lactam, it's alpha lactam. I don't know. So I'm not the right person to be giving really good feedback on this statement. I can feedback on the structure and the grammar and general things, but we always make sure that someone who's doing biology at one of the top universities is giving feedback. So what you can see here is more bridging. They said, okay, it interests me about this. So actually I watched this TED talk and Marin says this. And then again, this made me wonder if we could combat blah, 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 blah. And you keep on going and she's just really getting into details. This talk raised another question for me. Should we be restricting the antibiotics until there is a long-term blah, blah, blah? So what you can see here is they had this one experience, but from that one experience, they've spent, I don't know how many lines this is, like 14, 15 lines, just nerding out about, but that made me think that. And then I watched that talk, but then she had a different opinion, which brought another question to me. And then ends it with, I think it's important to take a global perspective to produce beneficial solutions for the population as a whole. That is why that personal statement is really, really good. Or that topic paragraph. Again, specific detail. So to sum up on topic paragraphs before I take a few questions, what do you need? Reflections and specific details and in-depth research. This is just a no-brainer. You have to make sure, and if you think you've made it specific, you probably haven't. On our website, we've got about 300 examples of really good personal statements that you can see, and you can see admissions officers giving feedback on them as well. So if you want to look at what a really good topic paragraph looks like, just go on uniorise.co.uk and again, it's free. You can just check out different subjects and what makes a good or bad topic paragraph. But the more specific you are and the more you reflect on something, the better. What we don't want are descriptions, long descriptions, which have no analysis. They have to have analysis. Look here, this is a description. This is what the book is about because I read the blurb. And this is analysis. It made me think whether we could genetically modify something stem cells so that they're more effective at fighting off bacteria, reducing the need for antibiotics. That is an analysis. This is description. This is also description, but like barely description. Don't list. Again, you saw in the physics one, I read this and I read this and I read this. It's just not very effective. And then mentioning A-levels is another thing that I see in about 50% of students that we work with. They have a paragraph on, I study this A-level and this A-level, which has given me these analytical skills. And basically, despite a lot of schools telling students to write a paragraph on their A-levels, it really doesn't add anything. And in that paragraph, you could be talking about a particular thing in your subject that's fascinating you and showing how you've analytically reflected on it critically to demonstrate your passion rather than just telling them that you're passionate. But you're talking and saying, maths A-level has given me the analytical skills to understand problem solving. And geography has given me an interdisciplinary mindset. And again, like they know what A-levels you're taking. It's going to be on your UCAS. Don't waste time. The only instance in which you should mention your A-levels, and it's positive, is let's say you're applying for computer science and you want to talk about a particular part of your maths A-level that is related to computer science. So, this particular aspect of logic and proof is really important in computer science, and then link that to why maths has helped you be a better computer science student. I'm going to pause there on topic paragraphs. We are about 40 minutes in, and Rafi mentioned
we've got some great questions. We've got some great questions, Ollie. Absolutely superb questions. So first, I mean, there's some absolutely brilliant takeaways for all of our students here. But what I think one key point of it is they're actually, when they're writing these statements, they're showing, they're doing, they're not just talking about. They're actually demonstrating their ability, which I think is so important. So let's dive into some of those questions. So just to clarify, Ollie, you've gone through the introduction section. We're now going through the topic sections, and that'll tick off one of the questions. The next one, which is I think a very, very strong question, which is, should you be naming specific chapters and pages where you found the information or highlighted the interest, or is it okay to be kind of more generic?
That's such a good question. And I'm so glad to have asked that, because that happens a lot. And it's basically no is the short answer. Particularly pages. You should not, referencing pages is overkill. In page 43 of this book, I'm not going to check that. And that's like 4 characters of space that you're wasting. Chapters is different. You don't have to at all, but you have to reference the part of the book. And if that is the chapter, that's fine. So let's say there's a book on economics and chapter 4 is about climate change. You could either say, in his chapter about climate change, I was really intrigued about how the unit economics of carbon is blah, blah, blah. You could also say, in chapter 4, I was really intrigued but you don't have to mention the chapter, and don't mention the chapter all the time, because then it's like you're overcompensating, which also makes me think that you might be lying because you're just making up chapters. So in moderation, but the main thing is that you're referring to a specific part. And then again, it doesn't matter. It's about the analysis afterwards, because I'm only going to believe you. You could say on page 243 and on the second line of the third paragraph, the ninth word. But if you don't make an analytical reflection, I'm not going to believe you. So that's more important than the chapter.
Absolutely, Ollie. This is brilliant. And we're getting even more questions flying into the chat. So this is absolutely brilliant. So this is a very tactical question, but I think it's very important. In terms of how long should your introduction be?
Yeah, there's no again, there's a lot of misinformation online. Some forums say it has to be 7.5 lines, 12 lines. This is all not true. I mean, I've seen introductions that are 4 lines that are fantastic. I've seen some that are 15 lines that are fantastic. Like, generally speaking, I don't want to, it's like somewhere between 4 and 8 lines, like a normal paragraph, but I wouldn't do a 2-line introduction, and I wouldn't do a 20-line introduction. But again, it's about the content. If you can have 1 or 2 sentences on an experience, 1 or 2 sentences on what you learned from that and what your reflections on that experience was, and 1 or 2 sentences on how that's motivated you to want to study this further at university, that's about 6 sentences, which will be anywhere between 5 lines and 12 lines. But if you start getting into like, is 11 lines better than 12 lines, you're playing the wrong game.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a wonderful answer. And it actually sort of segued into the next question we have, which is from Dollar Academy, which is, how do you prioritize which experiences to include in that personal statement? Because I think that's a particular pertinent question.
Yeah. So you should prioritize, and a lot of students do this a lot, and I can show you an example later. They prioritize experiences that they think look cool and are exciting. It could be a work experience, but then they're not actually related to the subject. So I see this all the time in economics. They'll say, I did work experience in a bank and I love finance. But what you'll learn if you do economics at university is that you learn very little about the real world and about finance, unless you do like a module in your final year where you learn a bit about the theory of it. The experiences and the topics you talk about should be relevant to your subject. And the more relevant they are to your subject, or the more relevant your reflections are to your subject, the better. So I could be applying for philosophy, and maybe I did work experience by being an Uber driver, which is not relevant to philosophy. But if I say, you know what, when I was an Uber driver, I kept on got into my car, and we had conversations about the nature of reality and metaphysics and existentialism and the nature of utilitarianism. That's totally fine, because it doesn't matter whether it's an Uber or whether you were in McDonald's or whether you're reading a book. It's the reflection that matters.
Absolutely. I'm just completely bringing it live for the person that's reading it, which is so important. So the last question we're going to cover before we let you get back to your slides, Ollie, is again, and this is an interesting question, because this might be the wrong way of doing it, but what tips would you give for someone who is applying to a number of different courses? I can imagine in a similar subject area, but with that same personal statement.
Yeah, great question. And this is the story of my life. And this is partly why I've got into this, because I was given bad advice about this as a student. I wanted to study 5 different subjects at 5 different universities. So I was like, you know what, maybe I'll do like PP at Oxford, but then I'll do like geography at Leeds. And then I'll do psychology and philosophy at Nottingham. And then at Sussex, I kind of want to do like economics and maths. And that was an absolute nightmare. Do not do that. But there are some cases which are much more valid, where you might want to apply for psychology in general, but in some universities, maybe psychology in Spanish or psychology in French or psychology in business. The general thing is, make most of the statement about the particular subject that you're applying for that's consistent with all your universities. But if you're applying like psychology everywhere and then psychology in a language or psychology in business somewhere else, have 1 paragraph kind of towards the middle or bottom about the language. But the best thing I would say is link that to psychology. So you might want to talk about Spanish and, you know, how Spanish culture fascinates you. And that actually in Spanish, because of the use of the reflexive, it changes the way that people think about the concept of blame, because, you know, the object is blamed rather than the person. And that has an effect on people's psychology. So that's just like a very specific example in Spanish. But if possible, try and make a link between the subjects so that if I'm reading this and you're applying for psychology, I'm not thinking, why is this person talking about Spanish? And if you are, that's fine. And people know that you're probably applying for something else somewhere else and it's not the end of the world. But don't do what I did and apply for maths here, English there, Viking studies there, and art there, because it's not going to be fun.
Absolutely brilliant, Ollie. It's great because you actually have a properly lived experience in that area. So we're going to park the questions for the moment. Please, everyone, keep firing them into the chat and we'll get them to them in the next section. So back to you, Ollie.
Back to me. Awesome. I'm just going to before I share my screen again, I would love to I know that there's a questionnaire that we want everyone to do. I'd love to go into a couple more examples about good topic paragraphs and bad topic paragraphs. And then I'm going to show you 5 big things that you should not do in your personal statement that I see in about 90% of personal statements. And just by not doing these 5 things, you'll probably have a decent personal statement, at least as the first draft. But if you could just go on the chat for now, I think there's only 7 questions. It took me like 2 minutes to do it. Just take the next 2 or 3 minutes to click on the survey and answer the questions. It really helps us kind of make sure that we're getting feedback about how we can make this more useful for you. And then the first 3 of you who take a screenshot proving that you've completed it and send it to my email, which is what I'm putting in the chat right now, I'm going to personally give you a free statement review because I really want you guys to do the statement. So the statement, the survey. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes until 1:48. And whoever are the first 3 students or participants who email me, don't email me your answers because I probably shouldn't see them, but email me the confirmation screen. And then whenever the time is right, you can reach out to me and I'll work with you to get a statement review. Also, in the meantime, we do have a team of about 150 students from basically every subject imaginable, apart from Viking studies, actually, who are there to give one-to-one support on statements. And we work with schools to do that. So if you are interested in us helping you and your entire year group, then get in contact with me with the same email and you can connect me to one of your teachers and we can talk about how Unirise can help your whole school.
So, Ollie, while everyone's sort of cracking on with that and taking the notes, or what's the email? It's just in the chat, everyone. You can just find it there. I'll just post it again so you've got it there. Oh, someone's already done it. Brilliant. Perfect. Oh, I'll post it again, Ollie. It's 1 second. There we go. So now everyone, it should hopefully be coming to everyone now. Fingers crossed.
Right. And I'm just also going to post the survey again in case people have come in. I just see 3 people have joined. So there's a survey link. We've got, I'll give you 2 more minutes to finish that off. Raf and I have both posted it, so should be all right. Raf, were you going to say something? Is there anything?
I was just,
Raf, or
yeah. No, this is a question because I mean, obviously, when you work with students, I think one of the really interesting kind of nuances is how you get them to be reflective, as it's kind of one of the key aspects of this. So are there any kind of frameworks that you're going to run through in a moment or talk about kind of how you get started doing that? Because it is a very different concept than kind of the ways of writing that you might be used to going through your normal, traditional sort of high school educational experience.
And the truth is it's really hard. And the personal statement is a very specific thing. I think, we've got Sarah saying it doesn't show any confirmation after completing. Well, then maybe, Sarah, at the bottom where it says like 7 out of 7, you can just take a screenshot there or whatever you feel confirms that you've done it. Let me get back to your question. Yeah, it's really hard, Raf. That we've actually built something, again, it's free on our website that I'll walk you through maybe in a moment that scaffolds you through that process. And I'll kind of show you how that works. But we'll give the students 1 more minute to do the questions. Joshua, you've done it. Thank you so much. You're a hero. I think Sarah's done it as well. If you've done it, guys, just let us know in the chat. Min, you've done it. Hero, thank you. Sarah as well.
Brilliant. But this is the way to do it, Ollie. This is the way to do it. I mean, this information is so valuable for us because what we do is when we do next events, when we pick next guest speakers or people to come in to help us develop the UKI Fair and Forum, we use all of this to make sure that we're delivering really high quality content and experiences that will help you and your fellow sort of future students get what they want out of and managing their transition to university. So it's just so valuable. So thank you all so much for filling in the questionnaire.
Awesome. All right, well, we'll jump back to it. I love your question. We've got 10 minutes, so I'm going to reshare my screen. And we are going to go. So on our website, if you do this course where we kind of break down, how personal statement works, etc., because of this thing where it's basically, I'm telling you all this stuff, but it's also like me telling someone, just like get a six pack, or like just be clever, or like be interested. It's like a really hard thing. I've been trying the six pack thing for years and it's not working out. So I understand that it's difficult. So we've got this thing called an interactive statement builder. And basically this like hold your hand through the whole process. And also on our website, again, for free, on the bottom right, you can click on the little like icon and you can chat to someone who can support you through the process. What we don't do is write personal statements for you. There are lots of people who do that, and I would not recommend it because it's unethical, it's cheating. And often we have ways to realize who's copying and who's got it written, and you don't want that to happen to you. But we do kind of help you through the process. So for example, for an introduction, we help you find your specific example, and we give you lots of cues and lots of things to write. But what I want to show you is a topic paragraph. So for example, what we've built for you, and this is one that I've had filled in by someone. We've got this table here. So you mentioned the resource, the book, or the whatever. This one is called, Misbehaving. Who's the author? Easy. What's the linking phrase? So these are the linking phrases that you can use. So instead of saying, I read this book and it was really interesting, it's like, oh my God, awful. You might want to say, Richard Thaler's Misbehaving forced me to revise my perspective on, or reversed my stance on, or led me to reconsider, or refined my perspective on, or highlighted the importance. These sentences, these little kind of phrases will really force you to think analytically. And then what's your personal reflection? It forced me to revise my perspective on what I learned in A-level economics about all consumers being rational. And then here we've got another row, or column rather, for you to add your specific details. For instance, so this is you proving that you've read it. Loss aversion is, when gamblers are willing to gamble 6 times more in order to retrieve their losses. And then for each topic paragraph, you might want to do this 3 times. And basically, if you do that a couple of times, same with extracurriculars about, being a school prefect, improved my leadership and communication, being part of the school council, or doing the piano, strengthened my resilience. I had to juggle it with studies, or playing football, blah, blah, blah. You basically copy and paste these tables. And then obviously you have to add all the grammar and you have to touch it up a little bit, but you can see it's the same kind of thing. For example, let me zoom in a little bit. Intrigued by the power of simple interventions based on psychology, I watched Richard Thaler's Misbehaving, which forced me to revise my perspective on what I previously knew about human rationality. One example he explores is loss aversion, where gamblers, blah, blah, blah. It struck me that given our understanding of humans' lack of rationality, so many economic models are based on the assumption that humans act rationally. And again, remember that book I mentioned before by the woman who doesn't like giving money to poor countries? Let's look at the difference between this one and that one. Reading Dead Aid shifted my perspective on the effectiveness of international aid in solving poverty. Moyo points out that despite $1 trillion of aid sent to Africa over 60 years, poverty has risen actually by 11 to 66% during that same time. Not looking good for international aid. Disturbed by this work, I wanted to understand what policies are most effective. This led me to read Poor Economics. Pop in the chat if you know what I just did here. What is the thing called? I've said it in the introduction. What's the word that we use? It starts with a B. That I've just done here, or the student's done here, saying, disturbed by this work, I wanted to read this. This led me to read that book. What is that called? Let me see in the chat. Yes, bridging. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, Dollar Academy. You guys are awesome. I think there's 2 Sarahs. Great. Thanks, both Sarahs. So yeah, they've done bridging. This led me to read this book, which highlighted the importance. Back up there, just stole it from that. Feel free to steal these words. Using a blah, blah, blah. I was refreshed to read how they advocate for randomized control trials. This also forced me to reflect on Moyo's work, the woman who doesn't like aid. While she uses case studies to show how aid can reverse growth, she's not able to make causal claims on the effect of aid. Now, look at that. That is a banging topic paragraph. I am proving to you that I've really gone into the details of this kind of thing. I'm also realizing that I'm spending a lot of time on this and we've got a lot to go through. So we don't have time to go through this one, but basically, as you can see, it's extremely detailed and it talks about 4,000 milliliters of pus and 50% survival prognosis and autologous pancreatic islet cell transplantation and a lot of teachers, for example, thought that there's too much medical information and it's too long and impersonal. But actually, just to prove to you, this level of detail, this is from an admissions tutor, is an excellent analysis of a complex case. They show their understanding and the reflection shows maturity. So what I'm trying to say to you is, even as you read this, you might think, blimey, that is a lot of detail. That's boring and it's long and impersonal. It's not. It's actually going to lots of detail. This is a student applying for medicine. Obviously, they're not applying for art. And that level of detail is really what sets out an outstanding personal statement, as long as it's reflected on. From this, I realized the role of primary care services, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go through this quickly because I want 2 minutes for questions. Extracurriculars, again, all on our website, which you can find out on unirise.co.uk. And basically, 5 things not to do. Number 1, don't list. We already know that. Number 2, don't use overly fancy language like don't say manifest or thus or henceforth. A lot of people think that by saying henceforth, they're going to think that you're smart. They're not. Like, they're going to just realize that you're using a thesaurus and that you're not being authentic. I'm not saying start kind of speaking in slang, but just write as you normally write and don't feel the need to impress them with fancy words. Number 3, don't pretend you're an expert. Don't say things like, as AI takes over jobs, we need to see a new politics emerging where the only way to save our democracy is through a basic income. You don't have the answer to these questions, nor do they, to be honest with you, nor do we. So don't pretend like you know all the things that you're already an expert. Be humble about your ignorance, because we're all ignorant. Number 4, don't use cliches. Ever since I was born, I've wanted to be a doctor or an architect. It's not true. You didn't want to be an architect when you were born. You were like struggling to survive for the first, 5 years of your life, or even longer in my case. So don't use these cliches about being passionate and like, ever since I was young, I've had a desire to help people. It's just like so cringy for us to read all the time. We see it tens of thousands of times. And finally, don't make grammatical mistakes. In these 3 sentences, we have 11 grammatical mistakes, which we're not going to go through right now. But really, really, it's worth having someone review your statement. It could be a teacher, but it really should be someone who understands that subject. And that's the big problem a lot of schools make. They get like the form tutor to review it, but that form tutor is a chemistry teacher and you're applying for history. No matter how smart and fantastic and well-intentioned they are not going to be able to give you the subject-specific review that I wouldn't be able to give this, because they're talking about, minimal invasive damage, which I don't know what that means. I mean, I can guess, but you get the point. So make sure you have someone from a particular subject expertise review your statement. If you want, you can have Unirise experts review statements. On average, we triple the number of students getting into Oxford and Cambridge, and we double the number of students compared to previous years getting into their first choice university. So you're happy to email me at ollie@unirise.co.uk. And now I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and 2 minutes, Raf, any important questions? Sarah, if you want extracurricular stuff, just go on the course. We've got bunches of videos on it. That's way better than me talking about it.
Absolutely, Ollie. I'm just going to say the Unirise website is an incredibly robust resource, and it takes you kind of through every step of the journey. So I think my biggest recommendation is obviously go check out the website and actually try it, give it a go. Even if you're not even in sixth form, even if you're a year 11 or a year 10, just get a flavour for it, have a go at it and think what you might want to include. So I think we've actually timed this very well, Ollie. So before we conclude the session, it would just be my pleasure to thank you so much for your time today and your insights. And just sort of say to schools, if they have any burning desires to reach out to Unirise and get you guys to come in and do some workshops. I know that's something that you guys do quite often. And obviously for all students, make sure that you do reach out, sign up to the website. All the information on there is free of charge. And they really do break it down nice and easily. I've actually personally looked through I've worked through the whole course myself just to check it out. And it is really strong and a really, really simple process. And it will work you through all the way from introduction, all the way through to conclusion. And it's a great resource for how you can also help your colleagues and your friends applying to university. So Ollie, thank you so much for your time and your insights. It's been an absolute pleasure. And everyone, make sure you sign into the next session. Oh, sorry, Ollie.
I am actually going to schools this year and giving workshops for 1 hour, kind of going into this into a lot more detail. So if you're interested, again, I'll just drop my email and we can arrange it with your school for me to come in and give you kind of more personalized feedback on your personal statement. So do just, I think I've shared that with everyone. I've just given you my email there. So feel free to reach out.
Perfect, Ollie. Well, thank you so much. And everyone, make sure you join into session 3, which will be starting soon on how to win your place at Oxford and G5 University. So we'll see you later. Bye-bye.